Another edition of Riding Home. Thank you for listening. Please press the subscribe button and comment down below. Dean Legge, Dylan Webber, Dylan, Georgia, the number 6 team in the country, getting ready for Missouri, who has not played well on the road. All three of their losses this season, they've not got a road win yet, and not only that, they've got some pretty spectacular failures in doing so. Meanwhile, Georgia's been practicing, getting ready for this stretch of the season. I mean, they got to win 2 of their next 3 games to get to Atlanta. Overall vibes in Athens.
Pretty confident and riding pretty high. They just got a win over a team that a lot of people around the country were saying, nah, they're not going to beat her. It's at least going to be closer than it was. Still, a relatively close game, but I think people had around the country, people had doubts about Georgia going into Florida, and right now, people in Athens are saying, hey, we were on the right side of this, and so they're riding pretty high.
It's amazing how quickly the narrative can change. Georgia really did dominate that game. I know people can go listen to our commentary from that game if they'd like to. We always appreciate people listening. But that game was I'm not going to use the term I use a lot, which is that game was not close. It was close. It was relatively close, close enough. But once you got to the fourth quarter and the Gators had not scored a touchdown, that meant that they would have to score 3 touchdowns in the final 15 minutes in a game that the first 45 minutes they hadn't scored. When you look at Missouri, one of their road games was against Kentucky, and that road game, that game in terms of rain, was worse than what Kentucky dealt with against the Dogs in Athens. It looked horrible. So it's hard to know, really. Kentucky really dominated them in many ways. And then you've got Kelly Bryant sitting there with a hamstring injury, and it's hard to know really what you've got there. And on top of that, last thing, Dylan, and I'll let you go. Watching Kelly Bryant at Clemson in his full season there, season and a half as a starter, so to speak, he's not going to give you trouble with his overall quarterback play. He is a guy that's going to have to put together some running yards too. That's the part I just wonder about for Missouri in this thing. This is about a 17-point game, line. Excuse me. How does Missouri attack this Georgia team that for all the grief that it got for about 3 weeks there, certainly did a lot of things right against the Gators?
Well, the matter of fact is, it doesn't matter if Kelly Bryant can or cannot throw. He is going to have to throw. Yeah. He's going to have to if they want to win. Because straight up, Georgia's defense against the run has just been incredible this season. Matt and I talked about this yesterday, and I just saw a statistic online. Georgia is the only team in the past 20 seasons, I think, to go 8 games without conceding a rushing touchdown. The first 8 games.
Is that something the school put out?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it was SEC Network put that out.
Well, the only reason I ask is because, if it doesn't come from Claude and them, I'm a little skeptical of it because Chris Lakos, Leland, that group up there, they do a very good job with football statistics. I don't doubt it. And even if it's not been for 22 decades, it's an amazing Georgia's played amazing defensively this season, particularly against the run. And you look at Missouri. When you look at Mizzou coming into this thing at 5-3, they're averaging about 184 yards on the ground. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. That's not the end of the world, but for instance, the Gators were at 128. Are you just suggesting, look, it doesn't really matter who they go up against; they're just going to stop them?
I don't know about that. I would say that every team will have a difficult time running the ball on Georgia. Of course, one long run can change those numbers quite a bit.
Yes.
I don't know, missed tackle on the outside, and a busted 80-yard touchdown run that changes things incredibly. But any team going up against Georgia, whether that be Missouri, Florida, Alabama, LSU, whatever, is going to have to earn those yards on the ground.
No doubt about that. And peeking ahead here, Missouri averages, quick math here, 15 yards more a game on the ground than Alabama does. As it relates to LSU, the Tigers are coming in even lower than that, almost 20 yards fewer. So, look, this is a quintessential sandwich game, a game that you're talking about being put in the middle of Georgia's two of their biggest three rivals. Um, I just think if you're Georgia, you need to come in. You don't need a scoreboard watch. Doesn't matter who wins LSU, Alabama. What matters is getting this win under your belt so that you have one more game to win. Because everything beyond the conference championship, the national championship, all these aspirational goals. Honestly, anyone talking about that right now in definitive terms, including Ohio State, who I think is probably the best team in the country. There's just everybody except Clemson has a serious game in front of them, dude. I mean, when you look at nationally, if we're being honest, I know the Clemson fan base pretty well. They don't think they're going to lose to South Carolina, but I know they're going to go into that game, a little bit jumpy about just because you just don't ever know. And on top of that, with what the advantage that Carolina took over Georgia, winning that game, Clemson can't sleepwalk in that game and win. And Trevor has been a bit of a turnover machine. LSU deals with Alabama. Ohio State deals with Penn State. At number 6, Georgia will have to deal with LSU or Alabama. They still have to deal with Auburn, who is number 12. Oregon and Utah will have to deal with one another. Oklahoma and Baylor will have to deal with one another. That also leaves out Minnesota and Michigan. Those two teams can still cause trouble in the Big Ten. I don't think Michigan does not control its own destiny in the Big Ten. It can still win it. Much more past that, it's hard to take seriously really anyone else's situation. So, if you're Georgia, you need to deal with what you've got to deal with, which is winning, these games now. Winning them now. These are critical. Everyone seems to be pushing Georgia through to the championship game, Dylan. They're not there yet. And that's a ridiculous notion.
Well, yeah, and of course, and the thing is, it doesn't matter who they play because, like you said, they have to get there first. I mean, right. I don't know. I hate to sound like Kirby Smart here, but you got to be where your feet are. And
he's right.
Georgia still, Missouri, Georgia should beat Missouri. There's no question about that. They should beat Missouri, but that doesn't mean it's going to be just a fly-through game. It's not going to be just the easiest game in the world for them. And they got to play Auburn, and Auburn is a talented team.
Well,
nothing else for that. I mean, they do just go one game at a time, and then they can worry about whoever they're playing in the SEC championship when they are actually there.
The team now, according to all the metrics, if you want to look at that, if that matters to you in any way, Ohio State seems to be the team that is sort of zooming toward the front of the pack. And we'll know better tonight. I mean, I fully expect either Ohio State or LSU to be the one tonight. But I don't know, man. I mean, I do think, they can lose to Missouri. They can lose to Auburn for sure. They can lose to A&M. They're not going to be favored. They're not going to be the dog in any of those games. But they're all, legitimate games that Georgia has to pay attention to. Excuse me for my babbling. And, you can talk all you want to about, who looks the best and so forth. But again, Ohio State has a tremendously difficult schedule left. The Big Ten is a legit situation right now, just like the SEC. And the Gators will need Georgia to fall away. And they can't win the national championship, I don't think, at this stage. But I don't know, man. I mean, I do think you got to be where you're at. I think Kirby's right about that. For all the coaching cliches, lecturing the media, I don't know. Who is he talking to half the time in the room?
Fans? He kind of just stares off into the distance.
No, but I mean, what I mean is, like you guys say, who is you? I mean, is he talking to Jesse Palmer and Joey Galloway, or Mike Griffin and Chip Towers?
I don't know. The world, I don't know. His family,
because some of that stuff just doesn't even is not anything locally that's been written. I consume not all of the stuff that's written locally. I don't have the capability or the time, but some of that stuff is not coming from the local beat, and he kind of goes with it nonetheless.
I mean, I'm sure he watches ESPN at night after games or before games, and college game day, that stuff. I'm sure he hears what people have to say, maybe on Twitter as well. Obviously, really, like he did with the comment, even if they didn't think Jake Fromm could throw, I mean, he hears this stuff. He knows what's being said, whether he says they don't listen to outside noise or not.
I don't see how he could avoid. I mean, of course they listen to outside noise. Of course you try not to listen to outside noise. Of course you're human.
But you can't avoid it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, but the guy has done a tremendous job. I think he is pretty well disciplined with message, but I think also too he can hardly help telling the truth half the time, particularly when it benefits him about what's going on. Of course, he was nervous about Jake Fromm, and he admitted as such after the game. I think he was completely within his right to do so. Don't you?
To be nervous about Jake Fromm?
Yeah, I mean, Jake Fromm's human like everyone else.
Yeah, and he talked about, the lunches he had with him throughout the week and just kind of how he was, I don't want to say worried about him, but was thinking about him because this has been a somewhat rough stretch for Jake Fromm. And, the noise that's been said about him, it's been out there before, but I don't know to this degree.
No, I've been thinking about that more, man. After the LSU game last year, that was just essentially a 2-week period. In this situation, he had the LSU game, so to speak, plus another game after it where he couldn't even rebound. He just had to sit there and hand the ball off. I think this time was worse. I've kind of firmly planted my flag that this time was worse for Jake in terms of criticism.
Well, and I guess because the other few times there's been someone behind him that's been like, oh, replace him, whatever. Yeah, but this time true. It was just directed at him. It was like, I don't know.
What do you think? What do you think? I'm sorry. What do you think it's like to be him on a Saturday night after you don't play well? What do you think it's like for Jake Fromm? Just like he's in the room by himself, or maybe his family is there with him, or at some stage you go to sleep by yourself and you're just there in your own thoughts. I mean, what do you think that has been like for him over the last, however long?
I mean, it can't be easy. I don't know. I go to sleep with, in my head sometimes too, but it's, about, I don't have thousands of people tweeting at me saying I suck. And so, I don't know. I can't imagine it's easy. And I'm sure it kept him up at night a little bit, just, knowing that, way less, I don't know, important things keep me up at night, or what?
He's been through the ringer for sure. Justin, Jake, Jacob, the stress of this, I'm going to say job, is a legitimate thing. And I'm not sure there's a way to relate to it without essentially being a quarterback at an SEC school, a big SEC school. The quarterback at Georgia, just like the quarterback at wherever, Alabama, has a tremendous amount of pressure on him. And I wonder who else you could compare that to. In the grand scheme of things, but these guys aren't signing scholarships to go to Coker. They're going to Georgia. You know what it is. You can go to Dartmouth or elsewhere, Newberry, and play football. You don't have to go to Georgia. So that to some degree they sign up for it, but it is a tremendous stress, and I just wonder. I can't imagine dealing with that stress if you're Jake, going to bed at night, knowing that people around there are just beating you down, fairly or unfairly. Sometimes fair, sometimes certainly fairly after the South Carolina game. Maybe too much, but it was fair.
And you do have to give credit that he rebounded. I mean,
no doubt.
exceptionally well. Both last year after the LSU game going into Florida, and both this year going into Florida.
Well, Dog Post.
Go ahead.
Dog Post never participated in the stupidity. When I say Dog Post, I mean, we never wrote about what's wrong with this guy, or there was a lot of stupidity that was written and said about Jake Fromm after that stretch. We didn't really participate in that, and I'm not gonna make him a saint either. He is what he is. He is not as gifted physically as Jacob or Justin or Trevor.
He's flesh and blood.
Yeah, but he also slashes people. I mean, he's a killer. And that's the part that people don't appreciate maybe about him. I'm not sure if I'm putting it in words correctly. If he after he completed that throw, which was that was a hell of a throw. I mean, like,
which one?
The last throw of the game to Wolf. He couldn't step in.
Oh, yeah.
He couldn't step into it. He had 3 Gators coming down on top of him, and they actually protected really well in that situation. But he had 3 Gators on top of him. Swift took out one defender, but the guy landed right on top of where Jake was throwing the ball, so he couldn't move forward with his left foot. And he had to arm that thing. It was just straight arm talent. And it didn't just get there. I mean, he beat one-on-one coverage. He beat man coverage. He did the thing that people for that 3-week period or 2-week period said either he can't do or can't do very well. Well, I mean, apparently that's bullshit, because he threw on the critical down.
One of the most important plays of the game.
Of the season.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
He got the job done. Now, he did that against Notre Dame as well. So when you're the quarterback and you lose, you get criticized. It happens. It's what it is. I don't feel sorry for Jake Fromm necessarily. I don't. I may have said that a second ago. I don't. That's not accurate. I mean, he's got what he's got. He's in what he's in. For the rest of his life in Georgia or in the Southeast, he's always going to be looked at as a hero. He'll never have to buy a drink if he even drinks. So that's not going to be an issue for him. But at the same time, the persistent, what is so annoying, and I had another member of the media call me about this. He didn't know what I had written. He said, what bothers me so much is about how my colleagues, and he didn't say the company/network that he worked for. It was not a .com. I shouldn't say that. It was not the traditional .coms. He said, it drives me crazy, the narratives that my colleagues participate in and blow up and blow out of the water. And I said, well, did you see what I wrote? And narratives get out of control. And all that matters is what you do on the field, period. And we're going to see here in these last few games what Georgia's got left in their season. There's no moral victories that they need to win. There's no this, that, or the other, Dylan. They've got everything in front of them.
Wins and losses. That's the only thing.
We're going to see how they match up from here on out. Make sure you press subscribe. Tell us what you think below. What do you make of Jake Fromm's season so far? Let me know down below. Dylan, thanks for joining me. Dean Legge from Dawg Post. Go to dawgpost.com, dawgpost.com. We'll see you over on the website.